Sandy Krebs, but you can call me Chef Viva Vegana. In these videos, I'll be sharing with you how anyone can make delicious vegan food. So, let's cook. Hi, Chef Viva Vegana here. Today I'd like to show you how to make a no oil, no added fat Thai green curry. So let's cook. So in this recipe we're going to make all of the elements separately. We're going to do the sauce in a saute pan on the stove. We're going to roast the vegetables and the tempeh in the oven. We're going to make the rice noodles in a pot separately, and then at the very end we're going to put the protein and the veggies and the noodles in a bowl and ladle the sauce over it. So I'd really like you to think of this recipe more as guidelines than a hard and fast recipe. I'm using rice noodles in this, but you could also use rice or no starch at all. I'm using a baked tempeh, but you could also use tofu or no protein at all. I think one of the important elements is the vegetables. Again, you could use any combination of vegetables you like, but I think the important thing is to have this be a visually appealing dish. So you want to use vegetables that are different colors and maybe cut into different shapes, but you always want to make sure they're bite-sized pieces of vegetable because you don't want people having to cut up the veggies in their soup bowl. Although you can get good green curry paste at most retailers these days, I think you are going to have to make a trip to the Asian market for this recipe. The one thing that makes a green curry taste really good and authentic is kaffir lime leaves. If you don't add these into the sauce while you're simmering it, it just won't taste the same. This is a brand of curry paste I like using. It's pretty darn spicy, so you need to use caution when adding this curry paste to sauces. In this whole recipe, I'm using about 1.5 tablespoons of this curry paste. And I like my food spicy, and that's plenty spicy for me. May Ploy also makes a good green curry paste, and it's not as spicy as this one. Or you can find lots of other ones at retailers. Also, adding fresh lime slices as a garnish and then squeezing that lime juice over the curry right before you eat it adds a lot of flavor to this dish, and that's something you don't want to skip either. The very first thing we're going to do is start off by marinating the tempeh. You can marinate the tempeh for up to 48 hours, but I would recommend a minimum of 2 hours before baking. I think the optimal amount of time is about 24 hours. I'm just going to cut the block of tempeh into 8 triangles. And you want to find a container that is flat on the bottom so that while the tempeh is marinating, that all of the pieces can get evenly marinated. If you're marinating it for a day or two, you could stir it up and turn the pieces of tempeh over a couple of times just to ensure even marinating. The next thing we're going to do is make the marinade. I'm using stevia powder. Not all stevia powders are created equal. This unrefined powder that I use, you use very little to equal 1 teaspoon of sugar's worth of sweetness. You could also use agave or sugar in this recipe. I've got a 1/2 teaspoon of ginger powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cumin, a 1/2 teaspoon of red chili pepper flakes, and 1 tablespoon of peanut butter powder. If oil isn't a concern for you, and you want to replace that 1 tablespoon of peanut butter powder with a tablespoon of sesame oil, that's an option for you. So we're just going to mix these dry ingredients together and then add the wet ingredients. I have 1 tablespoon of raw apple cider vinegar, 2 tablespoons of tamari, and 1 cup of vegetable stock. We're just going to make sure that the dry ingredients are dissolved in the wet ingredients. And then I'm going to pour this over the tempeh. I'm going to cover this and put it in the fridge and turn the tempeh over every now and again just to make sure it's marinating equally on all sides. I have the tempeh that's been marinating overnight. I also have a lot of other veggies that I just have in the fridge. I have this ear of roasted corn left over from something else, so I'm going to cut that corn off of the cob and use that in this recipe as well. But I'm not going to cook it again in the oven like we're going to do with the rest of this stuff. I'm going to cut that off the cob and then add it into the sauce. But the rest of these we're going to cut into bite-sized pieces and roast in the oven for 15 minutes. I've got the oven preheated to 425 degrees and a rack on the very bottom of the oven. If you don't have a pan that's non-stick, you can use a silk pad or parchment paper under the veggies. Or if you're not concerned about oil, you can lightly oil the pan. But since we're doing a no oil recipe, we're not going to do that here. After all of this has been roasting in the oven on the bottom shelf for about 8 minutes, I'm going to take it out of the oven and turn it over so we get color on more than one surface of the veggie and tempeh. These are wide rice noodles that you can find in the refrigerated section of just about any Asian market. They're literally going to be in the pot of boiling water for about 30 seconds before we put them in the colander and rinse them with cold water. Then the last thing we're going to do is put these in very cold water and set them aside till we're ready to use them so they don't stick together. Okay, the rice noodles are cooked and set aside. The veggies and tempeh are happily roasting in the oven. I wish you could smell what I could smell right now. And the last thing we're gonna do is make the sauce. If this were a traditional green curry, as I mentioned before, we'd be sauteing the ginger and garlic and green curry paste in oil, but since we're doing a fat-free version, I've got the stove turned to medium-high. I'm adding the vegetable stock. That is equivalent to the amount of coconut milk I'm putting in. And to that, I'm adding the chopped ginger, the chopped garlic, the green curry paste, and 3 kaffir lime leaves. Now that that's all blended together nicely, I'm going to go ahead and add the corn from the ear of corn we cut the kernels off of. And we're just going to let that come to a boil and then simmer for a few minutes. You can see that the sauce is starting to come to a boil. I'm going to turn this from medium-high down to about a medium-low so we could allow it to simmer for about 3 or 4 minutes. The veggies and tempeh have been in the 425-degree oven for 8 minutes. So we're just going to turn everything over and stir it up so it has a chance to brown on the other side. And back into the oven for another 8 minutes. The sauce has been simmering for about 3 minutes now, so I'm just gonna give it a little stir. And the very last thing we're going to add is a ½ teaspoon of cornstarch that's been dissolved in a tablespoon of water. This isn't so much for the thickening quality of the cornstarch, although a ½ teaspoon will thicken it a little, but it's more to give it a nice glossy sheen. So we're just gonna pour that in and give it a good stir to get it incorporated all through the sauce. And that's done. So all of this has been in the oven for a total of 16 minutes now, 8 minutes on each side. I just took the tempeh off, and I'm just gonna go ahead and mix all of the rest of the veggies together and set them aside as we're getting ready to put this dish all together. And the very last thing we're going to do is put this all together now that all the separate elements are finished. The roasted veggies are still hot from having been in the oven just a minute ago, and the sauce is still hot, but these noodles have been soaking in cold water to keep them from sticking together. So I'm just gonna put them in a strainer and then dip them in hot water just for a minute to take the chill off the noodles, because if we don't do that, the cold noodles will cool everything down. And now we're gonna add just a little bit of everything else. A little fresh chopped cilantro and a squeeze of fresh lime. And there you have it. No oil added Thai green curry. I hope you enjoyed this recipe for no oil Thai green curry as much as I'm about to enjoy this bowl of curry. I hope you like and share the video, and I especially hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel. So until next time, let's cook.